Most tend to consider the DC universe a decidedly darker place than Marvel's. While it's true there's an aesthetic and even tonal delineation between both publishers, both practice their fair share of dark storylines. It's never really been the case that one company strove to be edgier than the other. Still, DC's darker elements are certainly telegraphed more prominently. Their biggest mascot is Batman, and as far as origins go, they don't really get much darker than his, unless your name happens to be Frank Castle. But while that may be the case, like Marvel, the DC universe is also home to some characters you wouldn't really expect to have emerged from tragic beginnings. Some were hidden beneath the surface, while other stories were there all along, and simply took a moment of reflection for readers to realize that yes, maybe a child raised by a torturous granny general would maybe have some issues as they grew up. So, with all that said, I'm Ewan, this is What Culture Comics, and here are 10 DC heroes with surprisingly tragic origins. Number 10. Cyborg. To those who were raised on the beloved Glenn Murakami Teen Titans cartoon from 2003, the first image of Cyborg that'll come to mind will be him as a booyah-saying, tofu-loving genius who had a constant back and forth with fellow Titan Beast Boy. The years since have painted a much darker portrait of the character, however, with Cyborg having made the leap from the Titans to the Justice League, and with it, a slight adjustment in personality. Even before all of that though, Victor Stone had a tragic origin. Readers will probably be able to discern as much given Vic is half man, half machine, but it wasn't immediately telegraphed by his place on the Titans or by his friendly demeanor. No one could have possibly figured out from appearances alone that Vic fell into a bad crowd when he was young, or that in the same night his mother was killed by an interdimensional monster, that he himself would be brutally attacked by the same creature and would become half machine in order to survive the encounter. Number 9. Plastic Man. DC have two stretchy guys, an elongated man and Plastic Man, and while both have seen their fair share of trauma, it's the latter, Eel O'Brien, who's had the rougher deal. Given the character's goofy costume and personality, that probably seems a little odd. You see, O'Brien was originally a criminal, and it was him getting double-crossed by his associates that led to him encountering the chemicals that turned him all stretchy. Granted, those are some pretty cool powers to have, but it's also worth bearing in mind that Eel nearly died during the whole affair, and that, even before, he was made an orphan at 10 years of age. Number 8. Vixen. On the surface, Mari McCabe has the dream life. She's a model by day and a superhero by night, and she's even climbed DC's ranks to join the Justice League on occasion. However, that didn't mean Mari escaped tragedy for long. McCabe was raised in the fictional African nation of Zambezi, which is where her powerful totem, the artifact that allows Mari to emulate the abilities of Earth's animals, originates. Her mother was tragically killed by poachers, and her subsequent adoptive father, a reverend by the name of Jiwe, was murdered by her uncle. Number 7 is Zatanna. Although the tragedy of Zatanna's origin isn't immediately apparent, it's something that rears its head the more you begin to contemplate the transformative effects of DC's many retcons on its characters, for better or for worse. Zatanna became a superhero after following in her father's footsteps, the legendary magician known as Giovanni Zatara. When her father goes missing, Zatanna combines her love for the mystic arts on the stage with her admiration for the Justice League, and goes on to become a key member in the years following. Sadly, Zatanna's early years on the team were made more tragic thanks to subsequent retcons, seen in Identity Crisis and then the New 52. The former retconned her time on the League by revealing Zatanna willingly altered the personalities and memories of villains and heroes alike, and it proved to be doubly controversial. Less controversial, but still maudlin, was the character's origin in the New 52. In this new continuity, it was revealed that her father Giovanni was actually one of the founding members of the Cult of the Cold Flame, a sinister magical organization devoted to raising an army of mystics. Giovanni is then killed by Constantine, so again, it wasn't the brightest of starts for Zatanna in DC's new universe. Number 6. Captain Atom. As the inspiration for Watchmen's Dr. Manhattan, it would probably be fair to suspect that Captain Atom has an equally tragic backstory. All that said, it might even be fair to say that the Captain had it worse, with his military career actually being the thing that led him down the path of being a literal radioactive man. Post-Crisis, and hot on the heels of DC's acquisition of Charlton Comics, the publisher reimagined Captain Atom as a Vietnam veteran who was framed for a crime he didn't commit. He's sentenced to death by a military tribune, but Nathaniel Adam is given an alternative. If he lets the military use him for an experiment with little to no chance of survival, he'll receive a full pardon. A no-brainer, really, given a small chance of survival is better than none, but still, there's no getting away from the fact that the military have effectively abused Adam by this point in time. The experiment that gives the captain, his powers basically involves the military detonating a nuclear warhead beneath a crashed alien ship with Adam inside. He dematerializes, only to emerge a near 2 decades later as the glowing superhero fans know today. Number 5. Mr. Terrific. Mr. Terrific, aka the third smartest man on Earth, is one of DC's coolest characters. Yes, his gadgets might seem goofy and the T motif may have its detractors, but there's no denying Michael Holt is a fascinating character, and one with a fascinating history to match. For all the success Holt's achieved throughout his superhero career, he didn't get off to the best of starts. His brother died at the age of 12, and while Michael was able to bounce back and go on to share his intellect with the world whilst also starting a family, his wife and unborn child died from an accident. Holt, caught in a pit of despair, contemplates suicide. Fortunately, Michael is paid a visit by the Spectre, who regales him in the tale of the original Mr. Terrific. Holt then vows to honor the original Terrific's memory by becoming a superhero, and while he's been able to chart a new course after the deaths of his family, it's something he still carries with him every day. Number 4. Booster Gold. Booster Gold is a glory-hunting time traveler from the future desperate to win affection and money from those in the 21st century. Gradually, over time, Booster comes to realize that there's more to being a hero than fame and riches, and it's one of the most gratifying character arcs readers have had the pleasure of seeing develop over the last couple of decades. Still, Booster's initial motivations to traveling back through time and getting rich actually stems from his tough upbringing. Michael John Carter was raised in poverty in the future, courtesy of his father, who ran out on both him and his sister after losing all their money gambling. Still, Carter was able to turn things around and became a star athlete with a scholarship. Things were going well until his father returned. Michael's dad managed to convince him to throw games on purpose so they could cash in on the winnings, and it cost him his career. This is what led him to travel back through time, to regain his reputation and potentially enjoy some financial gain after years spent living in poverty. Number 3. Alan Scott. Alan Scott was one of the original DC Comics heroes. A true legend of the Golden Age, Scott became the first Green Lantern and went on to play a key role in the precursor to the Justice League. Sadly, with time, Alan's spark began to fade. Scott's story was erased from DC continuity for years, until subsequent retcons brought the character back into the fold, and there alongside his fellow Lanterns. Because Scott was so inextricably linked to DC's multiverse, however, the character's origin took on a tragedy of its own, one only placed into an in-universe context with the release of Doomsday Clock. Jeff Johns and Gary Frank's series reveals how Dr. Manhattan was responsible for the New 52, and how it came from him killing Alan Scott and stopping the advent of the JSA. Number 2. Wonder Woman. Given no one does tragedy better than the ancient Greeks, it might seem a little odd to place Wonder Woman on this list. After all, the character's darker elements are more prominently telegraphed these days, and there's an obvious tragic undercurrent to the idea of Diana being caught between two worlds. But again, not unlike Alan Scott, Diana's origin took on a decidedly more darker tinge during the New 52. In an incredibly controversial retcon, Brian Azzarello and Cliff Chang reveal that the Amazons raped sailors off the high seas, only to kill them and put any men born into slavery. The series also retconned it so that Diana wasn't molded out of clay, but was instead conceived by Zeus when he had an affair with her mother Hippolyta. Needless to say, fans really didn't take to this origin, and it was thankfully retconned as a fabricated origin during the DC rebirth. Number 1. Mr. Miracle. Mr. Miracle is potentially the most fascinating example on this list, because, unlike all the other characters here, the tragedy of his origin was staring us in the face all along. Everyone just chose to ignore it, at least until 2016, when Tom King and Mitch Gerads came together to tell a new story all about the character, one that tackled Scott Free's trauma head-on. Jack Kirby's Fourth World stands today as one of the most unique and exciting worlds ever created, and Mr. Miracle embodies that from head to toe. The basic premise is that the leaders of two warring planets, New Genesis, a place that stands for all that's good, and Apocalypse, a place that doesn't, decide to trade their children to broker peace. Highfather sends his son to live with his counterpart on Apocalypse, while Darkseid sends his child Orion to live with Highfather. So far, so good, but things take a tragic turn pretty quickly. Once he finds his way to Apocalypse, Scott is raised within the torturous confines of Granny Goodness's orphanage. He's tortured repeatedly, all day, all night, and only escapes after another victim of Granny's abuse, Big Barda, falls in love with him and both escape to Earth. Scott would adopt a colourful costume as Mr. Miracle, but it's almost a mask to hide just how horrible his upbringing was. His biological father didn't care what became of him on Apocalypse, and in a tragic example of what real-life abuse can do to people, he still harbours some love for Granny. Exploring that trauma is what made King and Gerads' comics such a hit over the year or so it spent on shelves, and it goes to show how even the most exciting premises can bring dark consequences to the fore.